Welcome to episode 8 of the International Web Effectiveness Podcast, where Bill Hunt and I, Bill Scully, focus on the strategies and techniques necessary to improve web presence and manage your global websites. In our last episode, we discussed creative ways to leverage other people's money to budget your web projects. In this episode, we're going to talk about overcoming the IT line of death, also known as getting your tickets into development. But before that, I wanted to give a shout out to Mario Fisher, who wrote a really fantastic article and created a nice piece of eye candy titled How Google Search Ranking Works on Search Engine Land. The article breaks down how new content's discovered, indexed, and ranked using systems like Alexandria, SuperRoot, Twiddlers, NavBoost to further refine rankings based on user behavior, content relevance, and search intent. Bill, I know you shared this with me. Have you had some time to dig through this?
Yeah, I think this is an awesome image, a visualization of how it works. And I think, we don't know that it's absolutely right. I mean, his research shows, he's pretty much chapter and verse where it came from. But it's a pretty interesting look at how it all fits together at the end of the day. And I think some pretty interesting implications, not just for today, but for the future, is what I took from this. I think that already the chatter in the marketplace is, for me, was interesting how many people that didn't understand some fundamental things. And, I say that expecting the hate mail to come, but it was interesting, the number of people that were like, what? Google doesn't actually, come to a page, retrieve it all at the time that it discovers the link that, and let's show this handy dandy graph. It's like this piece here, this idea of the trawler, and as they were talking about actually in the I think it's Search After Hours podcast as well, about crawling and indexing and rendering and ranking, all those bits come together is that they find URLs on the web and then don't immediately, and this is where we get into some of these nuances that you and I often try to hash through before our episode, is definitions of things. The crawling idea and the indexing idea, Google is grabbing, all search engines do this. Even if you fire up Screaming Frog and click run, you'll see this happen where there's a delay before you start seeing the screen populated, and you'll look down and it's been through 100 URLs. So it's making sure that it doesn't get in a loop. And I like to explain it to people as, if you have 100 pages and they all have the same header, and there's 10 links in the header, all 100 pages on your website will link to all 10 of those links in the header. Why would Google immediately follow those? It'd be chasing its tail all day long. And so that's exactly what it's doing, is it's queuing them to be visited at some future time. And it gets those sources, as they say there, and it talks about in this article. Number one, did it find them on other pages? So again, we're going back to the idea of your authority and your findability in many ways is, does anybody else think this is a good resource? Then obviously sitemaps that you submit, crawling your own site, obviously, and then submitting things through the review functionality in Search Console. And so if we got to prioritize those things, I would think, and he does a good job of explaining this in the article about, Google's got how many backlinks does something have? Like on a brand new URL it discovered, if there's a lot of links to it, then I would think that there's a higher probability they're going to go fetch that page, render the page, index the content of that page, and then start these other scoring elements that are detailed in here. And I think this all gets back to the crux of their podcast, and a key piece of this article I want people to focus on is getting, nothing else happens in search until you're found and indexed. And, I've tried to communicate that to people, and we're all down in the weeds on so many other things when we're not even making sure that we're being found. And as we really think about this, if you read his section and you read about Alexandria and really this upfront piece about, getting URLs queued up and then prioritizing them to go fetch, obviously they probably want things they've never seen. They want things that maybe other people have said are good resources. And then if they have it, that's the other interesting thing. There's the discovery and then there's the refresh. The one thing I want to mention that wasn't in here that goes back to like a Bing thing is around index now. But if you want to see where I think why all this understanding the crawling and indexing and that is important is looking at what Cloudflare is doing in conjunction with index now. Cloudflare has a solution, this article, we'll put it in the show notes, that talks about how they built this idea of crawler hints where, Cloudflare is caching something and they know what's been updated. And in the podcast, the indexing podcast with the Google team, they talk about maybe they'd be able to go fetch certain blocks of content in your page. And if you think about this, if another signal for whether they should come fetch the page is that like true update. And I know John Mueller often talks about a material update. It's not like the person who hears, hey, I got to change something. Let me run a script that changes all the dates of my blog post this month. And that's a change. That's not a material change. And so I think all this tied together, and if you think about what they're doing with crawler hints, the date, the freshness date, when was it last updated? I think all these things really start to impact how we should think about making sure, A, we make it easy for search engines to get our stuff, where we do solve the duplicates and redundancies and all that noise. And we make sure that we're legitimately refreshing content. Because as we can see, it's pretty easy for them to understand the context of our content, what's changed, why it's changed, when it changed, and then they can make the decision, do they come back and get it? And I think as we're talking about this context from web effectiveness, this is something I think more than just the technical SEOs need to understand, but our content people, the people that are prioritizing content, the people that are writing content, that are revising content, and especially those people that want to reduce content. We need to understand how these bits work. So take a look at the article. Again, I think Mario did an amazing job of visualizing this and going through the points. So definitely check it out. Anything you want to add, Bill, to your view on what you saw in this?
The detail that he's laid out is fantastic. I've never seen anything like this before. It syncs up with most of the stuff that I've been reading over the past year. A lot more people are getting into the Google systems and the names, and it's not always clear how the systems work together. And this really did a nice job of putting it all on one page.
Yeah, this was excellent. So go check it out, people.
All right, so we're going to talk about getting through the IT line of death. As most people know, teams often struggle to decide what tickets should take precedence, especially when faced with multiple high priority issues. Sometimes there's people involved. Well, there's always people involved, but that could be one of the things that is a decision maker. But there are some strategies that can help you get yours through. And I'd like to talk about some of those today with you, Bill. I guess I'm going to throw out the first one here because this is something that I see when I'm on the planning calls. You don't want to be that guy known for not approving tickets because IT should have known. Really, what you want to make sure is when you're detailing out those tickets, it needs to be clear. It needs to include the problem, the impact, the proposed solution if you know one. Don't tell them how to do their job ever, but you can tell them what you suggest. You define what's success. And I think it's really important to also include, how they should test to confirm that it's complete. And all these things help approvers understand that you need and the urgency. And, developers do the best they can, and they do a good job. But sometimes you see people not taking the time to write the tickets correctly. I want to point out an example that I actually had, something that I shared with you the other day. So I was putting together a ticket for a language redirection based on entering a domain. So like domain.com, going to, Italy if their browser has been sent to Italy, Italian. And I did this, which I spent a lot of time, thought it was really good. One of the things I like to do is I like to sit on it overnight. And the next morning I got up and I realized, oh crap, I'm only telling them to redirect to .com. There's probably going to be times when someone's going to put some sort of a marketing parameter on it, and that is not going to work. So if I hadn't thought about that before I submitted the ticket, it would have basically been one of those situations where we approved the ticket, maybe later we find out the problem, or I think it's worse when you get the work back to approve it because it's done, and then you say, "Oh, but that's not what I meant," or "Oh, I forgot to tell you." So that's my 2 cents on that. What do you think, Bill?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think the easier you make a developer's job, the better it's going to be. And every one of those tips that you had helps us make it easy. I'm going to give you another example I had. There was about a dozen tickets in Jira, all essentially saying the same thing. We have a ton of broken links or redirects, etc. And again, 12 different markets, different agencies wrote them, different degrees of information, and they languished on the ticket board. Nobody was taking them up. And so when we reviewed this, we saw they were all essentially saying the same thing. And so we consolidated them into one, and then we went one step further. We said, so imagine a developer gets a ticket that says, I need you to fix 37,000 redirects and 20,000 404s. That's going to be deprioritized so quickly if it even sees the light of day. Because the first thing they're going to be is, where are these? Where is the page that they are on? Just chucking something up there and saying, fix this, means they need to crawl it or they need to find it and things like that. So what we found was we crawled it, and we found every single one of these at the end of the day. They took it out of Search Console. So 8 different agencies all submitted essentially the same ticket. When we crawled all the sites, we found it was because the UX team had changed the header. And when they changed the header, the links were changed. Some were redirecting and some were 404ing. When we changed the ticket to say, go into the header script and fix these, change this URL to this URL, literally A to B, and then remove this string or add this string, when we laid it out, and guess what they needed to do? They needed to fix 2 templates because we had 2 versions representing the 12 markets. And then, so they fixed the ticket now was go into these 2 templates, fix this header with these links, and then all will be good in the world. And when they read that, they're like, oh, I can do this in 10 minutes. Right. So something that had been 12 tickets that had been on the list for 6 or 9 months, somebody can now open it. Oh, 1, there's a global implication. Number 2, it's relatively simple, fix. And then 3, and he was able to do it in like 10 minutes. So not only did we clear 12 tickets that we had consolidated in one, everybody benefited, all because we simplified it. And like you said, we quantified it, that hundreds, or in this case, it was thousands of redirects would be fixed, thousands, meaning times 12 markets. So that was a big number, all kinds of other fancy language on the value prop of it. But at the end of the day, that's what it took to get up, move up the equation, was that simplification, the quantification. The one thing you mentioned that we struggle with is not insulting our developers. I've found in my long career, and I've talked to many people that are in development training, there is no place where developers learn many of the things we have to think about in SEO. Developers, like redirects is the simplest way to explain this. A developer will learn 5 to 6 ways to move people from point A to point B. And the one they will choose is the path of least resistance, whichever one they can deploy, which is why we used to always see so many 0-second meta refreshes. I can deploy that in a second. It takes me longer to put it in a JavaScript, or maybe less time than it is to reach out to the person managing the IIS server to upload a link into that, or send links out to Akamai or Cloudflare to have it out, on the edge. Every one of these requires a level of introduction. At the end of the day, only one of these redirects is beneficial for search.
Yeah.
The 301 redirect, right? And so there is nothing in the training protocol for web developers, unless they've encountered SEOs, to know that is a better method. So we often have to explain to people why. I'll give you a great example.
I was going to say, yeah. So in that ticket that I was talking about, the solution or the suggestion was do it in Cloudflare. You really don't want to do that as a redirect if you could do it on the edge.
Exactly.
Use a worker.
Because it both from a caching standpoint, and then once it comes through, then we're firing that, it just starts to get everything all wonky and confusing. Another one is, like you said, give them enough detail. I would go as far as citing chapter and verse, like you did in this case. This is where you go find out how to do it in Cloudflare. This is, somebody intelligent. Like I give you a great example. I worked with a company that the ticket was, I need you to implement a canonical tag singular on every page. And they copied the example from the Google documentation and put it in. And it was effectively, to somebody with English as a second language, put this tag on every page.
The Google tag.
The Google tag that actually said Swedish fish.
Oh my God.
Right. And so after like 10 days or so, everybody's panicking because traffic has dropped. Hundreds of thousands of pages have dropped out of Google. Now, one might argue, why didn't Google have a, warning, Roll Robinson? Some idiot put in some funky tag, but effectively that's what they did. And when we asked the developer, he said, that's what you said.
Right. And that goes back to what's the definition of correct? So you would give 2 pages with an example of what the canonical.
Exactly. Give them the QA. This is the other thing a lot of people don't know, is a lot of QA testing is software generated, right? So meaning somebody runs a tool that says, does it look like these 2 examples that Bill gave us? And so I go as far as, on the, write it out is, somebody from Italy or that has Italian language as their language preference, that individual is sent to this page. And write that scenario out so that they can simply take it, reformat it for software testing. And they'll run that test case and it'll be, oh yeah, it either passed or failed. And so be as prescriptive as you can with examples. So everything you had in your tips, I think we need to put that on a blog post, all of those, those great suggestions you had on how to write the perfect ticket. And she does a training. She used to have a training module on how to write the perfect, SEO friendly, developer friendly ticket. But anyways, the one thing I want to come back to is this name, the IT line of death. It's got an interesting story behind it. I had just come out of meeting with the CEO of a company. So the project they gave me was Google launched paid search. That's how old it was. And Google was going to all of this company's clients saying, you don't need to pay for traffic from them. We can send it to you. Just give us the money. And this company panicked. It's like, oh my God, they don't need to come to us for traffic anymore. And so I wrote up all these recommendations of things they needed to change. The CEO said, Bill, whatever you need, this is project number 1. Whatever my resources are your resources. So I'm feeling good. And I think at a conference once, I felt like John Travolta walking, Saturday night fever with that, strutting my stuff. I walked into the CTO and he knew exactly what I was going to say. He goes, so yeah, Steve told you that you can have whatever you want and you need. And like, yep, essentially, hey, you work for me now, dude. Let's get cracking on this. Here's my list of stuff. And then that's when he introduced me to the IT line of death. And he said, everything on that whiteboard right there was blessed by Steve or one of his subordinates. And he said, see that faint little dotted line down the middle of the board? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, that's the IT line of death. That's the reality, because we only have the staff and the resources to do what's above that line. Yet every single thing on this list has been blessed by the same person that told you you have full access to all of his resources. So unless you can get any of your things you need above that line, and that means you have to do battle with everybody that fought to get their stuff above the line, it's not going to happen. And so, like we already talked about, the number one thing to move something above the line of death is make it easy. Make a developer want to do it. I think the second thing that I did, so what I did that day is I said, do you have all of those write-ups? Where is the documentation for all those tickets? And I went through every ticket to see if there was some way I could jam in an SEO requirement.
Oh, smart.
So you think about it, if I need something links in like a nav, if I wanted things on the homepage, like I was trying to create clusters. I don't want to give who it is away, but they're very topical. So we needed a topical cluster and then subclusters. So we needed to change the navigation. And the fourth or fifth thing on the list was, main navigation retooling. And I'm like, sweet. So I found that owner. It was number 3 or 4 on the list. We went through what I needed. We reconciled it. They had a proper taxonomist. We went through the logic and we were able to get about 70% of what I wanted mixed into their requirements for that ticket that was already blessed, already funded, already prioritized. And it didn't add, I think it added maybe 3 hours to the ticket because it blended well with what I had no idea what they were planning. So, go through the existing tickets and see, can I shoehorn my piece in here? And then if somebody's got sort of adjacent goals, let's say somebody, hey, and this is the thing, everybody's now in these, SEO is a product. So like Eli, his whole product-led SEO, people are productizing things. And so look at some of the products because, CEOs, especially in e-commerce companies, have pet projects and things like navigation, or like when I worked with Dell, everything at Dell was about basket size. How do we get people to get more stuff in their basket? And so how can we weave things into basket size? These guys too, they had like the 8th thing on the list was people hated site search. So when we talked to the site search people, it was everything we needed on the SEO side would benefit site search. And because they were tired of the public criticism of how bad their site search was, we were able to shoehorn another 20, 30 things that we needed to do from a pure SEO into the site search improvement project.
Can you give an example?
So things like site search, one, you can have a boost list. Not everybody games their site search to get the exact page, but we did. We had PLPs where if somebody searched for this, blue widgets, we would link, hardwire the blue widget homepage to a query on that. Other things we would, we looked at the logic of the site search and it would use things like titles, frequency of words on the page, different signals like that. And we're like, hey, we need to fix titles for SEO. So let's fix all the titles as part of your project because it's already been blessed. I won't even talk about it as an SEO initiative. What do you need? And what they needed for titles and meta descriptions and back in the day, meta keywords, all of those things were things we had on the to-do list from the SEO side to improve Google rankings. So imagine if we're impacting the factors for site search rankings, which was an already approved project,
Yeah.
then every single thing on their needs list, but wasn't really well articulated, was also on my needs list. And so at the end of the day, about 85, 90% of all of my tickets that my critical tickets, I found a home for them embedded in a project that was above the line. And then the others that weren't were all content things. And then I affected that because they weren't in the dev cycle. We actually did a training on how Google finds things, and we used some embarrassment because they liked cutesy headings, and we said, well, that's not findable, and we introduced them to Google keyword query tool where they're like, oh wow, I can find like the paragraph headings and the next 8 articles that match this concept. Going back to the idea, like Corey and them talk about, take a primary entity and then sort of, drill it down into its subfactors. We taught the writers to think like that, essentially writing their story for the entire query chain. So let's say you're a healthcare site and somebody searches on diabetes, you can pretty much guess what the next 8 are. Or if I'm looking for laptops, what are the next 8 queries that I'm going to do in my laptop search? So we taught the writers. And so all of this, again, it helped us get so many tickets in action. If we would have just wrote them from an SEO perspective and just said, okay, put them on a list, let me beg, borrow, and steal, bring you some Red Bull, whatever the normal bribes are, we would have been waiting. But because we had them well articulated, like you defined earlier, and we found existing projects where they could be connected to, we were able to get so much done so much faster than if we had stayed in our little bubble, simply posting tickets, hoping someone will elevate them at some point in time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting and good stuff. Hey, this is Bill Scully. I just wanted to let you know that we have a free training course called Demystifying Hreflang. It includes 6 modules and is over an hour long with a quiz at the end of each module. You can find it at internationalwebmastery.com. Hope to see you there. One of the things that I do, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but it works for me, is I'm always looking at the 80-20 rule. So I'm not creating, dozens of tickets a week. I'm creating one maybe a week or every other week, depending on the size. And, usually the things that take a lot of work are going to provide the most value, unless they're fixing stuff from a audit standpoint, which brings up another point. So like from an audit and what you had described earlier, where you see these huge numbers of redirects or broken files, don't submit every audit ticket. Like, even if you were looking at creating tickets for redirects, I would focus on the footer and the header first, and then work your way down. Once you get to the pages, you'd probably even want to re-rank those priorities if there's a whole bunch of pages you don't care that don't get links. Any ideas, thoughts on that?
No, I think that's brilliant. And there's two sides of this, right? So like you said, an audit, I've seen agencies that sort of try to demonstrate their value contribution by the number of tickets that they submit or want submitted, right? So again, you're overloading the system, knowing that they're not going to get done, but at least they can say, hey, we put in 527 tickets as a result of our audit. I love how you prioritize it because, again, resources are limited. Yeah. And so what's going to move the needle? What's going to be, what's going to create value for the organization? What's easy to do? And I think I've seen in some of your audits where, you might weight that. What is the degree of difficulty? And then what is the value? And then if you resort that, you find the ones that have the most balance, where it's not too much work, but has a lot of value. And then you move down that continuum. I'm going to throw this out here because in one of the next few episodes, we're going to talk about some benefits of centralization. And this gives me an idea of one of the things we're going to talk about there is having a central person especially if your web development is centralized, meaning this team builds websites for all the markets and makes changes. Like if you're an IBM or an HP, you have a central team that makes the changes and they get deployed everywhere. But you have multiple agencies, multiple SEO teams. You need somebody, a team, again, going back to our center of excellence or our search console, bring those tickets into this team, join them, weight them, like you said, the 80-20 rule. Because it's interesting too, and I know you've had this encounter where you just get like the craziest one I saw was it took 9 months to get H1s put into a page that was a really creative design. And then there was 4 tickets came in a couple months later from audits by one of these, hip agencies that was saying, don't use H1 tags anymore. So huge fight to get H1 tags in. And then lo and behold, from an audit comes, requests to remove H1 tags.
I've never heard that before.
Right. And it's like, come on, guys, that's not going to see the light of day. It's never going to hurt us to have them. Right. Anyways, that's, by having this group of experts and include the members of your search console or your center of excellence, you can vet these. Again, it gets left and right of the equation, degree of difficulty and value to the organization, exactly as you were saying. And that's going to help these move up the value chain.
I really like the idea of centralization. I keep going back to that. I don't know why. But I just this week, I had a situation where it wasn't a ticket, but it was actually a request for me to write a brief for a ticket. And it turns out that I happened to know that there was going to be some future work done that would basically just undo all the work that would be done with this request. And so, it obviously made sense, if you can wait a month, why don't we just wait a month? And we decided to do something different, but we didn't ask them to do that work and then ask them to redo the work later in a different format.
One of the coolest things that a company did was they funded a person to be like they didn't just do this, but their primary job was to write tickets and be a member of the Scrum meetings.
Huh.
And then how they were trained as an SEO, they had no SEO ability. They were like a junior Scrum master and they were hired for their project management and ticket writing and all of that side of the equation. And they were trained on the SEO gotchas, those things on the dev side that can have a negative impact or positive impact on SEO. And their job, and I remember we collectively wrote all of these buzzwords. It was like, buzzword bingo. And as they sat in these meetings, if they heard these words like JavaScript, or we're going to go to Angular, or we're going to do whatever, redirects, we're going to sunset content, they would latch on to that ticket. They would listen, and then they were sort of the voice, the contributor from the SEO team, because they could never have time to go to all the meetings. But this person would go to the meetings, they would write the tickets, they knew the personalities of the developers, they knew how to prioritize things. And so they would listen for these and either try to shoehorn things in, or they would preempt them. They would get the ticket, they'd bring it, they maybe knew enough to be dangerous, but they knew the buzzword. Oh, they're gonna convert to an Angular or a React system. So they brought that back to the team and said, what do you think of this? It's like, oh my God, it's going to devastate us. This was in the day where it would have devastated our performance, or we're going to sunset all this content, or we're going to do this. And so having that, they funded this person because now it gave them a seat at the table every meeting. It gave a person who was essentially the translator of the SEO needs, the technical needs, the ticket writing. And so they were able to take all this geeky SEO stuff, translate it into project management lingo, ticket lingo, developer lingo, and understand. And like we talked about, as you mentioned, they wrote every single test case. because
Wow.
that's what they knew is how to test it. And that made such a world of difference for getting these projects through. And it meant we lost, an SEO headcount, but because we could get more things in, meant that, we were willing to concede that role to have this role. So another creative way that you can, get things in, get them integrated, and more importantly, find things that could be catastrophic.
That's really cool. Hey, I think we've given a lot of good examples of how to get things into the queue, but maybe we should try to come up with some ideas on how to get things off the, like, what if you've tried all these things and there's no opportunity for you to, borrow a relationship or, piggyback on another business objective? Have you had any experience where, like, I don't know, there might be malice or other reasons why things don't go through?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this in the business case course, that who's holding it back? Is somebody got pet projects? Again, like I've worked with companies where if it doesn't, like the Dell case, if it didn't change basket size, it probably wasn't going to see the light of day. If it didn't affect usability, it was not going to see the light of day. And so that's not necessarily malice, it's just a perceived importance. What I would do, what the number one thing that I was using for a while, and I see people talking about this now, is look in the annual report. And if anybody in there, especially like if you've done, like you said, these 80/20 tickets that are going to really move the needle, if you have in your annual report that you're at risk for Google changing their methodology, that if there's a business risk to losing organic search traffic. I mean, if your CFO and CEO put that in your report, I would link to that in this ticket.
Yeah, good idea.
And it's not really embarrassment, but it's encouragement to say, look, we've got two senior executives on the hook with the street saying that if shit doesn't happen from an organic standpoint, especially if you're trying to get things in to correct something after an update, look, we've told Wall Street this is a business risk. Again, quantify. That's all you can do. Embarrassment. I've got moved the needle through embarrassment. Come in, do a presentation. Hey, oh, my favorite. I'm glad you said this. My favorite trick I ever used was I would list all of the tickets and I would put the date submitted and I would do an at now. So it would calculate the number and then I divide by 30. So it was like the number of months or weeks or days from when I submitted the ticket. And then what I would do, remember how like we have a missed opportunity matrix?
Mm-hmm.
So not doing this, again, if we quantified this, we'd say, if we did this, we might be able to generate an extra 10,000 visits a month, right? So at now, 5 months, and then 5 months times 10,000 or 50,000. So 5 times 50,000, we've missed out on 250,000 visits times the average cost per click of those words related to those visits. And that's like $587,000 we have had to or would need to spend for this. Just simply giving people an order magnitude of the delay has gotten a lot of tickets moved up, but you got to have your act together. You got to have it quantifiable by the value loss in order for that to work.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, it's really important, don't just submit a ticket and wait. It's good to follow up regularly, offering clarity, providing additional information. One of the things that I like to do is try to build a relationship with the Scrum Master or, who the real approver is. Things can get presented in certain ways if you're not in meetings. It's a really good idea to have that relationship and build trust. And in some cases, they can give you the tips and tricks and, the back office ways to get these things approved. And they might actually know whose relationship you could borrow. So
Yeah.
maybe there's other people with similar goals to yours. And, I don't think anybody wants a bunch of tickets on a list.
Right.
So get your stuff off. Don't submit stuff that you know will never make it because it's not valuable enough, or you don't have enough detail for them to make a decision.
One bonus tip. I know we're trying to wrap up. I learned this from Frederick Sebton from Sebton and Company, who you know.
Yeah.
So when I was working with Absolute, he introduced us to these things called Scrungo. And so it's a combination of taking items on a scrum and bingo. And what you would do is you would take every ticket that is in the queue and you would list them all or things you want done. And then what you would do is you describe it, or people could come take them from, we had a board. And then if you finished it, so you would read them, and then if you could finish it, like a lot of this simple stuff, fix the header, right? 10 minutes, you fix the header. And if you did, and the person reviewed it and accepted the ticket as closed, you got to spin a wheel, like a spinner, and it would land on a number and you would stamp your bingo card. And if you got bingo, you got to pick a prize. And so there was intense motivation. And it wasn't like, we had some silly stuff like some Swedish taffy, but it was, like a stereo or, a $500 gift card to Amazon, or, all different prizes, some samples, different things. It was worth people's time to want to do these, but that's what it was. Every time you solved a ticket, you spun the wheel, got a stamp, and if you got 5, standard bingo, you got to whatever the next prize in the queue was. So it was amazing how many tickets we could get through when we had that exercise. The other one was just everybody getting together and explaining the ticket beyond just what was in the writing, saying, this is what I really meant. Or you could hear the developer, did you really mean this? What if I combine these? What if I did it this way? And so that human side of this is a whole nother way. And it's fun. It becomes a game, atmosphere when you do it. So another interesting tip to try to get things not only on the list, but things completed and off the list.
I love that idea. So that's like a hackathon, except you have all your tickets up on, I don't know, Post-its or something.
Mm-hmm.
People can go up and pick one, get it done, spin a wheel, and potentially win a prize.
Yep.
That's awesome.
And it was just fascinating how many tickets we got done. We would do this every quarter. Now, it's not that people were waiting till the end to the quarter to do their tickets, but because there was always, more tickets to do. But that was an interesting way that we could close out, especially a lot of low-hanging fruit.
And what did they call that?
Scrungo. So it's like scrum bingo.
Okay. Huh. This is something that's really important for global webmasters to master. If you can't get your stuff into development, you can't get your job done. You had mentioned the business training. I think we'll probably come up with some other trainings around this as well.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, this is Bill Scully. We hope you're enjoying our conversations as much as we love bringing them to you. If you like what you hear, we would really appreciate it if you could take a moment and rate our podcast. Your ratings help us reach more listeners and keep the show going. Just head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts and give us a 5-star rating. Let us know what you think in a review section. It only takes a few seconds, but it makes a huge difference for us. Plus, we love hearing your feedback. Thanks so much for your support. Thanks, Bill. Anything to leave with?
Nope. Obviously, go check out our courses. We've got a variety of them. The one that Bill was just alluding to is the href lang business case, which is not just for href lang, but we talk about some of these, barriers and how you can build a business case to justify href lang. And then, we're working on a variety of things, talking about indexing, best practices, centralization. We've got 4 or 5 courses in the queue that we'll be releasing soon. So check them out, and then make sure you follow us on our Facebook group and post any questions you have for us from this. And I don't want to steal your thunder. I'm
You got
pimping
it.
the group, but
got
yeah, come check us out. Tell us what you think, how we can improve, and topics you'd love for us to cover.
Great. Thanks, Bill. Talk to you soon.
Have a good one.
Bye.